Hello bakers, this is Alex from Bench & Bowl, and in this video I will show you how to make Russian-style rye sourdough starter from 2 malts suitable for making quality rye breads. This starter recipe requires 4 ingredients: raw rye malt, fermented rye malt, rye flour and water. Any type of rye flour will work. Raw rye malt can be bought from homebrew shops. It should be labeled as pale rye malt with EBC value of 4 to 10. Fermented rye malt, also known as red rye malt, is not sold outside of rye region of Europe, sadly, and you will have to import it from countries like Germany, Austria, Latvia and Russia. I'm starting with this recipe specifically to explain why this method works so good, and later on there will be a video with alternative recipe with fermented malt replacement you can buy easily in any part of the world. This recipe is split into 3 stages and should take from 3 to 5 days to complete. First stage should take about 2 to 4 days, and the last 2 stages will complete in 1 day together. You will need scales to weigh all of your ingredients. For first stage, you will need 20 grams of raw rye malt, 20 grams of fermented rye malt and 40 milliliters of boiling water. You will also need a heat-resistant bowl to mix your ingredients together with boiling water. It is a good practice to measure out all required ingredients beforehand. Please note that you will need to boil a lot more than 40 milliliters of water, as it will be evaporating in the kettle while heating up. And please be careful when dealing with boiling hot water. Why does this recipe use 2 malts? Raw rye malt is a dried version of sprouted rye grain, which was not roasted. It retains all of naturally occurring enzymes and contains a lot higher concentrations of microflora than your average flour. Fermented rye malt undergoes natural fermentation after sprouting and turns into a grain variant of sourdough. It is then roasted to stop enzymatic activity and stop fermentation. This gives fermented malt its unique flavor and also leads to high lactic acid concentration inside the malt. Both flour and malt not only contain yeast and lactic acid bacteria bakers are interested in, but also pathogenic microflora and mold spores, which are also present in the air around us. Yeast produces alcohol, and lactic acid bacteria produces lactic and acetic acids, and these chemicals kill pathogenic microflora, turning your water and flour mixture into useful sourdough. But often yeast and bacteria lose the battle, and our mixture gets covered in mold or turn rancid, and may potentially harm our health. This is where fermented rye malt comes in. It makes our initial mixture acidic from day one, leaving almost no chance for pathogens to multiply and spread. Acidic environment also speeds up yeast and bacteria reproduction, and when you combine all these factors together, you get faster and more consistent starter development, which leads to waste reduction and makes it safer to use in baking. This method is using boiling water during first stage. Boiling water helps releasing acids from fermented malt and also gelatinizes the malt, which helps yeast and bacteria to digest nutrients. Okay, so once everything is measured out, boil some water and fill your mixing bowl to preheat it. Once your bowl is hot, drain the water carefully. Add 20 grams of fermented malt into the bowl and immediately add 40 ml of boiling water. Mix carefully and thoroughly until no dry spots left. Once mixed, let it cool down below 40 degrees Celsius. If you don't have a thermometer, test your mixture with a finger after 10 minutes or so. It should be blood warm inside. Next step is to add 20 grams of raw rye malt. Mix it in thoroughly until no dry spots left. Now you can relocate your starter into a suitable container which can be covered loosely. Make sure to weight your container and remember its weight. It will make your life easier in the future. Some people use jars, but I prefer to use plastic containers. Use transparent containers so you can watch development process easily. Cover the container, but don't seal it, and put your soon-to-be starter somewhere safe and warm. You also need to decide the temperature at which you want to develop and ripen your starter. Best results are achieved in the range from +22 centigrade to +32 centigrade. The warmer the environment, the more lactic acid will be produced and the better flavor your rye breads will have. The cooler the environment, the more acetic acid will be produced instead, which might lead to crumb gumminess and off flavor sometimes. I personally prefer to use +31 centigrade, and my first stage at this temperature is usually finished in about 48 hours. But I had success with room temperature of +22 centigrade as well, and it took me about 72 hours to finish first stage. I would also advise to stir your starter every 8 to 12 hours during first stage. That will speed up yeast and bacteria reproduction. First stage is complete when your mixture doubles in size. Don't rush this process, don't feed it, just leave it alone. It should have bubbles inside and should have a strong smell of spoiled porter beer. If it doesn't double in size in 5 days, then either your environment temperature is too low or too high, or something is wrong with your ingredients. Check that your temperature was correct and stable throughout the whole process, and try again. If it keeps failing, then you probably should search for an alternative source of ingredients. Stage 2 and 3 are the same. Take 20 grams of your starter and throw away the rest. If you add 20 grams to the weight of your container, then it will be easier to measure everything out without using additional bowls or containers. For example, my container weighs 16 grams, so I'm removing starter mixture until I see 36 grams on my scale. Now mix in 20 grams of rye flour and 20 milliliters of water at room temperature. Mix everything together and leave at the same temperature as before for 12 hours. Repeat one more time and you should have fully developed and mature rye starter from 2 malts in 12 more hours. You will have 60 grams of 100% hydration starter and you've only used 80 grams of flour and malt and 80 milliliters of water, wasting only 100 grams of ingredients in the process. Russians don't normally use starters directly and make levains for all breads. I would suggest to always make a levain with this starter, otherwise excessive amounts of enzymes might negatively affect your bread. You can also use this starter for wheat breads, but it tends to be extremely sour and may over-ferment your wheat breads easily. I use it regularly for both rye and wheat breads though, and I have adjusted my fermentation times accordingly. Maintenance is very simple, just use the same approach as in stage number 2. 20 grams of starter, 20 grams of rye flour and 20 grams of water. Keep at the same temperature as you used during development for 5-6 hours. That should be enough for a feeding session. You can upscale it if you wish. Keep in the fridge for up to a week without feeding when not baking. That's it for now, have a good day!